Well, welcome everyone. Bienvenidos. I'm so very glad to have you joining me and everyone in our Zoom poetry studio for today's Cultivating Voices live poetry, our weekly reading series, and today our first new books showcase of November with poets Emily Mohn-Slate, Teri Cross Davis, and Matt Mooney. Rachel Mennings was scheduled to join us and unfortunately was not able to join to her, and we'll be rescheduling to bring Rachel to the stage in the new year with us. Well, I'm your host, Sandy Yannone, author of Boats for Women from Salmon Poetry. And since March 2020, we've brought you Poetry Weekly from around the world as part of our international, intergenerational, intersectional Facebook poetry group. Of our poets who joined us last Sunday for our live Poets Focus open mic on the theme of waves. As you can imagine, it was a moving experience, and I encourage you to watch or rewatch on our Cultivating Voices live Facebook page or our YouTube channel, courtesy of the efforts of Don Krieger. Also, thanks to those of you joining us live here in the Zoom audience and or watching live on Facebook, and hello to those of you watching us in past, either live on our Facebook or YouTube recordings. With a reminder that we'll be putting links today to the poets in the live chat here in Zoom, as well as over on Facebook. And please support them by purchasing one or all of the books featured today. The holidays are just around the corner, and what better gift than poetry to yourself or to a beloved? Well, let's turn to today's featured poets. First, joining us is Emily Mohn-Slate. I'm so happy to welcome Emily to Cultivating Voices after spending time and hearing her book when I was hosting the collectibles reading series. And I was just so taken by her book, The Falls, that I couldn't wait to have her join us here on Cultivating Voices live poetry. I know that you will truly appreciate the poetry that you're about to hear from Emily. And it's so great to be in her company again. And we've scheduled this many months ago. And so, as you often are hearing me say this fall, I'm so happy because the readings that we planned months ago finally have arrived. And there's really no better reading than today as an example of that. Well, Emily Mohn-Slate is the author of, as I mentioned, The Falls, winner of the 2019 New American Poetry Prize from New American Press in 2020, and Fee, winner of the 2018 Keystone Chapbook Prize from Seven Kitchens Press. Her poems and essays have appeared in Anye, New Ohio Review, Muzzle Magazine, Tupelo Quarterly, The Adroit Journal, and many places elsewhere. She teaches high school English by day and poetry workshops by night for the Mad Women in the Attic at Carlow University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Emily Mohn-Slate.
Thank you so much, Sandy, for that warm welcome. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you to Sandy and Don and Kim for organizing this. I know there's a lot of kind of planning and logistics and problem solving that goes into this. So I really appreciate all of your efforts to bring people together around poetry. And I feel really honored to be reading with Teri and with Matt today. I also want to say that I'm missing Rachel Menes today. And Rachel, when you watch this, we're all sending good energy your way. So I am going to read a few poems from The Falls, which looks like this. And this was my first full-length book, which came out a little over a year ago, you know, right in the middle of the pandemic, hopefully further along anyway. And I'll share some poems that connect to different threads in the book, so that you can have a sense of, you know, what some of the through lines are. But I'm going to start with one new poem. This poem has an epigraph from an Arcade Fire song. Can we ever get away from the sprawl? People at yellow lights scrolling. People walking downstairs, tapping. People opening doors, clicking. People on toilets scrolling. Clicking my witching rod, pining for escape. People crossing streets, tapping. People watching kids climbing, clicking people. My pocket-sized trap door, what I touch most in a day. If everyone does it, it's okay. My fingers skitter like wings over 5-inch screens, jitter patterns through minutes. I used to pick up my head, look around. The sprawl is inside me now. People in meetings scrolling, frowning, people weed whacking, clicking, people jogging, tapping. A guy who used to work for Facebook tells me, they know exactly how to hook you. Don't feel bad about being addicted. So I shouldn't feel guilty for texting when my friend is telling me a story, when my kids are yelling for help, when the light is yellow. People at stoves tapping, people on bikes scrolling, people kissing, clicking, people clicking, scrolling, people tapping, clicking, people, I just have to check this one thing, scrolling, clicking, scrolling, people. My son tells me how he ends his bad dreams. I blink. Okay. Thank you. It's so wonderful to see people, see your faces and some people clapping, and no worries if you can't put your video on, but it's really lovely, you know, to be able to see you out there, imagining that we're in a coffee shop or a bookstore somewhere together. Okay. Or somewhere together. Okay. Okay, my first poem from the book, it's actually the first poem that opens up the book. And it came out of the hazy time after my son was born, my first child. I was completely sleep deprived and really struggling mightily with postpartum depression. And I was up late reading the news on my phone, which is never a good idea. And I read a story about a woman who accidentally left her baby on the roof of her car. So easy. A woman forgot her baby in the park. People found it, murmuring in the bushes, called it fairy. I want to keep sleeping when his yell slices twilight, not feed the baby whose appetite is unfeeling, total. The baby grunts, spits. I want to be alone, but it would be good for me to go out with the baby. If I keep walking, he keeps sleeping. A woman at the park's edge holds honey petals to her nose, breathes them the way I breathe the baby's furry head. A woman left her baby in the car, rushed to work. Her baby overheated and died. I forget things so often now. I never forget my glasses. It would be so easy to forget the baby. Old bikes lie on porches, washed in yellow light, exhausted. I hover 2 fingers above his chest, search for breath. I love to hear the baby's slight gasp when I turn on a light. I study his open mouth, flick the light on and off and on until I can't. I forgot my keys, my jacket. A woman drove off with her baby on the roof of her car. Did I fasten the buckle around the baby's soft waist? I didn't want to come out today, but it is good to smell the oily pizza boxes at Pino's, to dodge the garbage truck lumbering down Hastings Street, men hanging on by a tiny crescent. They found her baby at 45th and Chawla on the highway line, alive, not even crying. I had a hat once I loved, red and blue wool. I lost and found it in a Shaw's parking lot, mashed down, brown with exhaust. I washed it by hand, hung it up to dry. The baby licks the stroller harness, wets the rip-proof vinyl to a deeper red. Okay. Okay, the next poem was inspired by the very difficult reality of flying across country to Seattle to see my dearest friend when my daughter was 6 months old, and just the way that you see your life differently when you're in the air, which I know we haven't been doing as much lately. And the title is Lightning Flowers, and lightning flowers is another word for Lichtenberg figures. Does anyone know what those are? So they're these tree branch-like shapes that can occur sometimes on the skin of people who've been struck by lightning. So that's where the title comes from. Lightning flowers. My daughter is finally asleep in my throbbing arms. She grows roots that branch around my skin. The woman next to me on the plane, who let my wild baby grab her rings, lick the zipper of her purse, waving away my apologies, sleeps now too. On her tray table, her highlighted hair, a perfect frosted cake. Lois, married 38 years to her second husband, who died recently. He was a good one, she says, a really good one. It changes everything. Lois was surprised I have a second husband too. My first husband, a heavy bell still ringing. My second husband, clear light on green leaves. Maybe it was supposed to be this way. What do I know? In her sleep, my daughter clutches my shirt collar, the edge of a boat in her dream. Through the crack in the seats, I watch a movie, no sound. Tilda Swinton, Ralph Fiennes, and two younger actors eat pretty food, give each other meaningful looks. Then some betrayal, and they all go crazy. Tilda glides around in sheath, big aviators. Her sleeves billow like cool air. No baby to bounce. We coast into purple-black cloud to a forest of lightning trees on the horizon. The last time I saw my first husband, he was wearing a wool jacket, Oxford shoes, living alone in a loft. Just the right amount of silver laced his beard. He seemed happy. I think about my husband at home, the one who said, "You deserve to be loved well." We fly into light slashing the night skin, burning up the sky, and she wakes. I start bouncing again, sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in her tiny ear, lightning cradling our plane. How I wonder what you are. Branches barreling down. The future, the most beautiful, terrible thing. I have two more poems to share with you today. The next one, Sandy has heard, the reading where I shared a bunch of Charlotte Mew poems. So has anyone heard of the poet Charlotte Mew? Any hands? Yay, okay, a few. So Charlotte Mew is a British poet who lived at the turn of the 20th century, and she's not as well known as she should be. So as lovers of poetry, you should all go find her work and read her. You won't regret it. I read her work on the suggestion of one of my professors and just fell in love with her and her work. And I started writing poems to her in the form of letters. So this is one of those. And the epigraph is from one of Charlotte's poems, one of my favorites, in Nunhead Cemetery. Dear Charlotte, July. The others have gone. They were tired and half afraid, but I would rather be standing here. I wish you were famous enough for them to have kept your home intact. Dodie visited Whitman's stuffed parrot, but who knows where your weck is decayed. Today is hot for England, high July. A family picnics near your plot, laughing. A child drips an ice cream cone onto a grave. On the way here, I passed the London Pride Parade. I imagined you holding Ella or May's hand instead of your own faded lapel. Charlotte, can you smell the sea? It's not far off. Out there, you can float for miles. Try out your voices on the wind. When you come to my door on Elysian Street, I will ask you in. I will plant you a bougainvillea, water it until the bright petals blaze. When you met yourself at your door, which face did you see, wet with rain? At your grave, weeds wash your plot with weak colors. I will stay until the moon finds your grave, until the rooks arrive wearing their slick black coats. Okay, and my last poem was inspired by Ross Gay's Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, which if you somehow missed that book, go find it and read it because it's incredible. And his book made me want to try to write about joy, which is not something I tend to write about. And so this poem is very much about moving toward the light, trying to move toward the light, which I think is something we're all still, fighting to do right now. I'm trying to write a joyful poem after reading Ross Gay's new book, which makes me feel light and giddy. Like maybe a world in which figs fall from a city sky is possible. But my poem becomes about the collapse of long love, how even the brightest glint in the eye becomes shadow eventually. My son dances across the room in a red cowboy hat. He asks me to chase him. But the girl in the documentary I watch lives in a landfill outside Moscow. She drinks water from dirty milk jugs. And why does joy always slide into darkness? My son laughs, his 8 teeth new and white, shining in the sun while I tickle his belly. Joy must be at least as complicated as sorrow, which is one reason I hate those posed pictures people take before weddings, before babies, hands clasped over the woman's belly, cupping warm skin, thinking they know what's inside. Maybe joy is an animal that scurries when you get close. Or maybe it's my son pointing out the moon, saying, look, up there, which makes me think how he almost wasn't so many times. And doesn't the girl in Moscow, Eula is her name, have joys too? And this cramped coffee shop hums with people telling other people across a stretch of table what it feels like to live on this planet right now, to have a mouth, to form words. I'm saying, how are you feeling? She's saying, it was just so funny, so damn funny. And the woman next to me, she laughs, she sighs, she holds her belly. Maybe joy is the real mystery. Maybe I've been wrong for decades, only looking under the rock, pointing out the shades of dark. Last night, I lay across from my love and said, I love you. Something I usually say while opening the fridge, while leaving the house, my back turned. I said, I love you, staring right into his open eyes. What made me look is that I remembered he will die. Maybe joy is a hand reaching out in a fierce wind, one so very hard to open your fingers in or your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Folks, you've been listening to Emily Mohn-Slate. The book is The Falls. Hold it up, would you? I also I have the book. I love the book. I love it visually as much as I do the contents. You know, what a stirring reading that took us to so many places from, I mean, literally and figuratively, you know, from that devotion to Charlotte Mew and the devotion to all the beloveds. I'm reminded also, as you mentioned in your kind of homage or response to Ross Gay, that Richard Jackson, a poet that some of you might know here, also wrote a poem that for a long time I wanted to write a happy poem. And I think that is many of our quests, but yet joy and grief are always, always holding hands. And poetry is the prism with which we get to experience and understand that very intimate, brittle, and at the same time, strong, strong thread between joy and grief. Thank you again, Emily. What an absolute joy to hear the poems. Some of the poems again. Don't be a stranger, come on back and read with us. And stunning opening for today's new book showcase. Well, I happen to know all the work of all three of the readers today, and it's such a prismatic reading. We moved from Emily to a poet who, when I picked up Teri Cross Davis's book, I went to the launch actually of A More Perfect Union. We were in the throes of the 2020 election season. And this book could not speak more clearly to the necessity for us to be listening deeply and understanding the intersections with all the movements, in particularly the Black Lives Matter movement that continues to move the consciousness of not only people in our country here, but around the world. It is a powerful, powerful collection, and I am grateful to have interacted with the book and the poems, and to have then had the opportunity to welcome Teri to Cultivating Voices and read with us earlier this year. Again, I'm so very happy to be able to feature Teri Cross Davis and her work from the new collection, A More Perfect Union, as well as some other poems she'll share today. Teri Cross Davis is the author of A More Perfect Union. It's a 2019 winner of the Journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize, and Haint, winner of the 217 Ohioana Book Award for Poetry. Teri Ellen is the recipient of the Poetry Society of America's Robert H. Winter Memorial Prize. She is a Cave Canem Fellow, and she is also the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. And as I mentioned in our pre-reading gathering, how much I appreciate her hosting abilities whenever I have the opportunity to attend readings virtually at the Folger Shakespeare Library. She does a tremendous job in curating poetry events there. She lives in Maryland with her husband, the poet Hayes Davis, and their 2 children. I'm so glad to welcome you back, Teri. Thank you for being with us, and thanks for being a member of Cultivating Voices Live Poetry.
Well, thank you so much, Sandy, and thank you, Don and Emily. Just blown away, so haunting, and there's such a stillness and a light in your work. So I feel I'm in joy to be in community with you today. And Matt, I'm really looking forward to hearing your work too. Sandy, Kim, everyone, just what a great job. So to start, so thank you for having me back. I'm really excited to be here and to read from A More Perfect Union. So I'll start off. I feel in much conversation with some of the things that Emily read. So I'll start with Parta Sequitur Ventrum from A More Perfect Union. And that's a phrase, it's a Latin phrase that stands for the principle that the children of an enslaved woman are themselves born as slaves and owned by their mother's master. Parta Sequitur Ventrum. One morning, his knobby 6-year-old knees, his anxious pace as if to keep step with the question's steady overflow. Is there a giant octopus in the Bermuda Triangle? How is paper made? How do fireworks know when to explode? No one told me Black boys could burn so bright. Wait, I am wrong. The dark sky has seen their fire snuffed by white hoods, malevolent blue eyes and bluer uniforms, white women's screams, all have been matched to their tender wood. So I hug my son tight, kiss the curl crop so close it's straight. My mother, I insatiable, he is dessert, and I'll always have seconds. Each morning I lick my thumb, clean him up good, wishing in vain the amniotic sac had dried to armor. 2, night. His lisp, loose, syrupy sweet, sneaks into my ear. Feel its heat, small source, more flickered than flame, flanked by arms still dreaming of muscle. He claims, my squishy stomach, the best pillow. If the security of our locked arms could extend beyond growth spurts, clocks, calendars, to the someone interviewing him, to the someone following him in the store, to the someone holding my son's life in trembling fingers poised above a phone's keypads. Let my love be a note safety pinned to his chest. Send him back alive, unharmed. As a Black mother in America, I know my wells are birthright, pinned with iron, pinned in ink. And I wanted to jump back to my first book, Haint. Oh, thank you. Don had asked about it, and so I'll read you a poem from Haint. I'm in this space this Sunday, so if you're, if you guys know this feeling, Saturday is the free day. You can mess up Saturday and it's okay, it doesn't count. But Sunday, by now, you're like, okay, who's got clothes picked out for the week? What are we doing for lunches? What are we doing for dinner? What are we doing for dinner 2 nights from now? Where's the laundry? Did she get her jeans washed? What about this uniform? And so it's like Sunday counts double, and it drives me mad. So anyway, this gets I'm diving knee deep into parenting. So I'm here to tell you, this poem is called Let Down, which is the phrase that they use for milk when it comes down. So you'll understand all that. Let down. The books say that milk let down feels like pins and needles, but when you're pumping at work, it's more like lungs constricting under the crush of chlorinated water. You know, God willing, when she's 16 or 25, you'll never be this essential again. So remember this smothering need now, the engorged breast, the suction, the release. Know the ache swelling and flowing from you is caused by your hands cradling plastic bottles that your warm, twisting baby is elsewhere away from you. Know the sadness will threaten to sweep you under each time you take out the pump and you can't swim away from it. You must do this for her. You must stay. You must drown. I had the privilege of having an office with both my children, and so I was able to bring the pump into work and pump at work. But it is that first time I pumped and my daughter wasn't there, I did not know what to do with that sadness that drowned me in that moment. And I didn't realize what it was until my mother said, your baby isn't there. And I thought, oh, that's what's missing. That's why this hurts so bad. And it wasn't like a physical pain, it was all emotional. So I wanted to jump ship, if you will, and I'll skip to this poem. I've spent 2 summers I spent in Ireland in 2016 and 2017. When Hate first came out, my husband's book came out like 2 months previous, 2-3 months previous. And so we did a little book tour in Dublin and in Kerry. It was so much fun. And then next year I'm in a collective with other Black women poets, and we put out an anthology and we went to Ireland again. So I had a lot of and then I have Irish ancestry on both sides. Thanks, Ancestry DNA. The things you learn. So I felt this affinity, and I've loved many a great Irish poet. I mean, from Evan Boland, Eamon Grennan, Paula Meehan, the man himself, Seamus Heaney. Like you can't go wrong any which way you turn. So all that to say, a Black woman learns Ireland's history by bus. It took a civil rights museum to lift the skirts of the maiden city of Derry. Here's where I saw her Seamus Heaney tattoo. Belfast, the stamp at the bottom of the Titanic. Here I breathe in an industry defined by ghosts. Then it's back to you, Dublin. How sweet I got on you, I do not know. Blame that ancestor long ago. Let's hope it was consensual. But the words that crawl your streets align with my fault lines, neither of us accustomed to joy. On the road to Limerick, crumbling forts shimmer and shy away like mirages. On the River Shannon, swans play their part near King John's castle. Here, Frederick Douglass honed his pleas for justice. Shivers dart down my bare brown arms. But it's Newgrange, where stacked ancient stones call my blood to rise. 2 times a year, the sun flings a season's new song into a quartz cavern. Here, lifetimes were spent, bent, building temples to echo eons. At the entrance, water collects in a giant rock's hollowed hand. A wizened man whispers to me, dip your fingers and touch what ails you. And then I'll follow up with this. And there is something too about just being on a plane, and it makes you reevaluate a lot of things. And I always have to preface to say, I gave you this, I love Ireland. I gave you the spill. Now I hear this poem, but understand, I love Ireland. This has nothing to do with Ireland. A Black woman gets a window seat on Aer Lingus. Enough, Ireland. For all your lush effusion of color, inside me blooms a masochistic loneliness. Give me the screws I know best, the policeman quick to test my yes sir as acidless. Trigger the Midwest. Never on the Bible school test was this. Crucifixion kills, not nails into feet or wrists, but the weight borne upon the breast. You suffocate slowly in your own flesh. As I return to the upright cross of the US, I breathe easier, I breathe less. And I have to follow that up with a poem that my mom often responds to. Even though, and I often laugh because I'm like, you just like it, Mom, because you're in it. But there's more. She swears there's more. Okay. Thank you, Jesus. When the blue and red sirens pass you, when the school calls because your child beat the exam and not a classmate, when the smartphone drops but does not crack, The rush escaping your mouth betrays your upbringing. Thank you, Jesus. A balm over the wound. When the mammogram finds only density, when the playground tumble results in a bruise, not a broken bone, like steam from a hot tea kettle. Thank you, Jesus. And the pent-up fear vents upward, out. Maybe it's a hand over breast, supplication learned deeper than flesh, as if one could shush the soul, the fluttering heartbeat with 3 words. Maybe it's not so dire, an almost trip on the sidewalk, the accumulated sales total showing savings upon savings. Maybe it's as small as an empty seat on the metro. Or maybe, thank you, Jesus, becomes the refrain every time your husband pulls into the driveway alive and whole, and no one has mistaken him for all the black scary things. You mutter it, helpless to stop yourself from the invocation of a grandmother who gave you your first Bible. You say it because your mother, even knowing your doubt as a vested commodity, still urges prayer. You learned early to cast the net. Thank you, Jesus. And it's a sweet needle that gathers the fraying thread, hemming security in steady stitches. From birth, you've heard this language. As an adult, you've seen religion used nakedly as ambition, yet this sacrifice of praise still slips past your lips, this lyrical martyr of your dying faith. And I want to end it with, let's see if I can squeeze maybe 3 more in there, 2 more, 2 to 3, okay. Because I wanted to start this, because I will tell you, so again, everything I said about Sunday, this is what I think of when I think of Sunday too. And I also wrote this. In this book, I created 9 new goddesses, just goddess. There's a goddess of anger, which you'll hear from, goddess of cleaning, which you're about to hear from, goddess of lust, parenting, all the things. So here's the goddess of cleaning. I bequeath you bleach, its singeing sting. I bequeath you the scrub brush, best done on hands and knees. I bequeath you ammonia for the exorcism of dirt. I bequeath you power over clutter, the washing machine spin, the dryer's lint grin. I bequeath you the salvation of sweeping, a consecrated grip on the broomstick. I bequeath you the dustpan's collection plate, the floor's sanctified echo, the trash bin's penitent face. I bequeath you the gospel of a mop, the sacred slosh of a rinse bucket's second coming. I bequeath you the torn t-shirt, sided sponge, vinegar and newspaper squeak, the glass free of streak. I bequeath you an old toothbrush for tiles hard to reach grime. I bequeath you the grunt and scrub of wool, the eradication of rust. Trust in me, I baptize you in sweat, labor's beatific stain. I bequeath you the power to change, 1 room at a time. And so, just to make this as quick as I can. Here is quickly the goddess of anger, and then I'll end with this. The goddess of anger. I really wish she were real sometimes so that I can make a temple and we can pray to her often. The goddess of anger. Did he touch you? Did he hit you with jagged words or closed fists? Did he laugh at you? Were you polite even then? Were you lava under the skin? Then let me in. Unsheath the dagger of me. You've tasted pain, now let me master it. Let me in. I'll use the dust of his bones for tea. I'll rise, vengeful and caustic, a florid fury. I'll steeped in seething. I'll make his eyes bleed. Let me in. I'll dissect him unflinchingly. A backhand slap, a rake of fingernails. I'll spit my small mercies. I'll dance on him in stilettos, paint my toenails OPI red while the blood congeals. Let me be your ignition point, your pitch, the whoosh of hot, sweet breath. I'm all your swallowed heat simmered into flesh. I too can lift burdens. Let go of fear, of retribution. Let go of decorum and shame. Ride rage until it bucks and jump on it again. Damn it, let me in. And I'll end very quickly, and thank you all so much for your time with this poem, which speaks to the anger. My therapist told me a long time ago to lean into it, and I did. And so thank you again. And this poem suggests revolution. This poem has some adult language. I'm telling you now, we're adults. This poem suggests revolution. This poem no longer consents to play mammy or to wet nurse a seething rage at her own black teeth. America, your teeth have come in. You nip too much. This poem refuses to play religion. A Bible verse will not absolve you, America. If the pursuit of happiness, life, and liberty came from the Creator, she is about ready to backhand you in the face. This poem will not be your bottom bitch, America. This poem does not consent to Blackness being window dressing for the diversity brochure of a country where the board of directors never changed. This poem reads the fine print on you, America. This poem consents to be black ink, a clenched fist, pepper spray, and black souls marching on asphalt, freedom for and from you, America. If need be, this poem consents to double as witness, the dotted I and the missing reparations decree. Until then, let this poem heckle you, America. Let it yell, "Goddamn US, choke on cotton," while fanning itself and the flames. Understand, this poem doesn't want to be bloodthirsty. It would rather write about the cleanse of a cloudburst than the vengeful force of a water hose. In truth, this poem courts hope. Like a Volta, it wants to turn the page writing, "America, let us pen a new document, not a perpetual union, but a chokehold removed, as a black throat breathing freely is a self-evident truth. Let these lines be facts submitted to a candid world. And this poem, when spoken or read, let it alter, let it abolish you." Thank you so much for your time and attention. I appreciate it. And thank you.
My friends, Teri Cross Davis, the book is A More Perfect Union. And I could not endorse more the call for revolution and all of the themes that course throughout the book. Very similarly to how we talked about in Emily's book, that the prismatic is ever present on the personal and the political in Teri's collection. And it is, as you said, no diversity brochure. It is a collection, a powerful collection of poetry of this time and place, also speaking to the need for repair from the past, moving forward through to the future. Let me be your ignition point. This book is the entry point to ignition. Get this book, folks, if you haven't, and go to any more readings you can of Teri Cross Davis, because when I went to that launch, I was launched. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon, I hope, back with us. It's always a great pleasure. And folks, do check out the Folger Shakespeare Library's events, because Teri Cross Davis hosts some fantastic poetry experiences. Thank you. Well, all right. We have a triolet of poets today, and we welcome back today to Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, our good friend, Matt Mooney, who has been reading with us since those early days when we were going live directly to Facebook, when we were doing the open mics. And I'm so glad we're able to feature reading from Matt's latest collection from Revival Press, Steering by the Stars. Well, a little about Matt Mooney for all of you. Matt is a native of Galway and currently lives in Listowel. His 6 collections of poems are Droving, falling apples, earth to earth, Elu, the singing woods, and as I mentioned, his latest is Steering by the Stars from Revival Press in Limerick. Teri Ellen mentioned Limerick, so I always like to get a good Limerick story in, as I've been at the bus station in Limerick many, many times myself. Matt is the winner of the Padraig Life O'Conchover Award 2019 and currently serves as the deputy editor of the Galway Review, where he is also the poetry reviewer. And his poems have been published in many, many literary journals, including the Blue Nib, Vox Galvia, and anthologies at home and abroad. And he continues to feature in many live and virtual reading poetry events everywhere. And it's always a great pleasure to be in the company of Matt Mooney and his poetry. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much, Sandy. You know, I can see you there in the bus stop in Limerick now. I tell you, if I saw you at a bus stop in Limerick, I think I might be a danger to oncoming traffic or even traffic coming behind me. I would definitely stop. Great, sure. At this stage, we're almost family, you know. We're so long on the road now with Cultivating Voices, and of course our own Lime Square poets in Limerick City, you know, that you're very familiar with as well. So it's wonderful to be on tonight, and thanks a million, yourself and Kim and Dawn, for facilitating me in every way and for inviting me. The book is called Steering by the Stars, and I'll try to steer you through about 7 poems that I've selected specially for tonight. So we'll start with The Girl on Her Bike, a poem that looks back at days in Galway when I was in my teens. The Girl on Her Bike. As we pedalled in harmony past the family farms of Galway ewes and lively lambs that April time, I dreamt down every road of how I'd play that day, of being a hurling hero by a lucky transformation. We were minor players then, all bunched together, but for an Auburn girl in pace with us in pleasure, I ached to give it my best shot that Easter Sunday, soon on Ardahan's hallowed hurling pitch ahead. Winners elated and hot on the way home, stopping at a pump. We pumped spring water for each other. Little did I know or fear as it gushed and splashed on the girl on her bike that she wasn't to be for me. And we go right now to the title poem of the book, Steering by the Stars. And this was written or dedicated to Michael Hartnett, that I look upon as one of Ireland's greatest poets, and that he was born in Newcastle West, and spent his days there, as well as in Dublin. And he had a great influence on me in my early poetry days, my early days of writing. My poems are written, you said, on being told to trim your sails, to stop you drifting on the rocks. And drift you did, and you left us looking into the sunset for you. Once in crossroads conversation, sitting around in the Arms Hotel, in the quiet before Writers' Week, I put it to you as to where I was, or if I was on the right bus at all. Are you a poet? You threw at me, in a voice that put me sitting up, knighting a vagrant soul searcher stranger, a serious challenge, led by the beck of your tilted cap. Down the road, I look back at you, eye to eye with me, taking me on. Mine will be written too, Michael. Yes, mine will be written soon. From here, I will steer by the stars. And we go back to Kerry, back here home to Kerry, for the next poem. It's called Peninsula, the Dingle Peninsula. Should it ever happen on my last hour to be on heaven's highway on an August day, and that in passing overhead I caught a glimpse of Dingle where I am today, its patchwork peninsula laid out before me, I'm sure I'd be drawn back to be rejuvenated where dreams were born again. I'd travel for one more look, its roads of many bends between bewitching robes of red and orange, blending for miles in fuchsia hedges and blankets of Montfriche, and see the Blasket Islands asleep off the Atlantic way. I'd be wafted away under the watchful eyes of its sculpted peaks, indenting the skyline. Above green slopes, trapping the sun all day and pouring it down from their bowls of light on high altars of green, lighting the way back again to my highway to heaven. So we move on to somebody else other than myself, and it concerns a really good friend that I didn't know for very long, because the upshot of the whole story is that he died during the COVID times, not from COVID, but from other issues, at a time when he was isolated as such in the nursing home. So I'm going to read you a poem called Beyond Pain, an important poem in my life, because when you come close to somebody, they leave an indelible memory. Beyond Pain. Well, do you know the pain has left me since you sat down somehow, he said, after our tete-a-tete as we sat on the edge of his community hospital bed, his port, since he was brought in from his home, an offshore island on the River Shannon, with severe sciatica bringing him down. Trying to ignore it with a wry expression, revealing his smile in a resurrected flash of happiness, buried so long by loneliness. His unseen brain belt, forever tightening and often frightening in his home alone, where seagulls cry. Here, cast up again. On daily medication, a brace to aid him, a gallant gentleman of 80 years. He replied half in jest, half in hope to me, when I reminded him that God is good. Faith, he'd need to come to do something for me the way I am. He made me laugh, and I left him braced on a Christmas Eve, living in hope in the hands of God above. And back to myself again, and a problem I had, maybe I have, still have, the loss of your muse. When your muse deserts you, a problem that quite a few poets have, I'd imagine. So it's called, poem is called Fugitive Verses. Out of reach, up in her chambers, windows the blue of the starry sky. High up in the castle tower above, she resides these nights and days, absented from my lyrical phrase. Probably reclining on her chaise, my muse no longer mine, I swear, sips nectar from a silver goblet, while I choose to idle by this way on a winged steed to glance aside, to receive her smile if she appears, whenever the clouds are cumulus, silently instilling me with wonder as I pass on a pure white Pegasus. Now, onwards now to a great love of mine, and the poem is called All Mine. It concerns trees that are plagued with creeping ivy. If ever you take note of what's happening in a wood that you visit, you'll see a lot of ivy, and they attack trees. All mine. I care for all my trees, big and stout or slim, and those that fall about, and low or squawking crow agrees, and wonders why I care at all for all that grows up in the wood. Higher and higher, since first I stood up on this first hill when they were young. I look at all my trees. Some are straight and high as one's eye can go, and I envy them their view, for it's little I can see below. Between all of them that's there, their heads stuck up in the air, the ash, the oak, the beech, and the sycamore. I'm attached to all my trees, and I worry greatly about clinging ivy vines that snake higher and higher every year, squeezing every tree tight until before long they're strong enough to kill. And so I go to war on them with saw and hatchet. I treasure all my trees, for they make me feel that I'm a wealthy man. And when I lean against them, I feel good. They stand their ground when I'm down. All stripped bare, their trunks are smooth, and some have backs of crusty brown. They're all mine, and I think they know my mind. The final poem, thank you. The final poem is called A Stark Cross. And it's about my brother. As the man says, it's about me and my brother, my big brother. One of my brothers who died from COVID and during the very early days of the pandemic, living in Dublin. It's called A Stark Cross. Before I finish, I'm deeply indebted to the wonderful Cultivating Voices, to Sandy, Kim, and Don, and to all of you listeners. And I congratulate my fellow readers tonight, Teri and Emily. I must say that I was lulled into a poetic dream or trance by their readings, and I had no trouble in starting up myself after that. But I hope that you enjoyed my poems as I enjoyed their poems. A Stark Cross. The only thing I wrote that end of March to mark your burial were 6 simple lines, grief-laden and finite. The rain fell gently on your grave the day they buried you in Lucan, the victim of the virus. A stark cross above you. Out the door of life, alone, the rest of us in lockdown far away. Consolation later in the loyalty of friends round your estate on a grief-filled day, in their applause as you pass by. And they sang our Galway song that says, "'Tis far away I am today, from scenes I roamed a boy." In your funeral film, their last farewell, their hymn from home for you. I have hesitated long, maybe in denial, to open up the book, the story of your life. Its good times and the bad as well, bettered bravely. For maybe I'm afraid I'd find myself inside there with you, living it to the full. Listening to you, Pat, my own big brother. Taking it all in, then seeing the funny side, laughing in the end. Gurmila Mahagrib, thank you all very much.
Everyone, you've been listening to Matt Mooney from the latest collection, Steering by the Stars, and that final poem, A Stark Cross, a reminder, of course, of of the starkness of the times that we continue to find ourselves in, which is why we continue to be in these small little squares with each other. But I do find that the silver lining, but nevertheless, a reminder of so much loss. And that poetry, as we know, is one of the things that can help us move through with and respect ourselves and our beloveds through that grief and joy, that teetering that we've been on today in our reading with our three poets, Emily Mohn-Slate, Teri Cross Davis, and Matt Mooney. Folks, this is before I make a few final announcements for today. How about we unmute and show our gratitude for these three remarkable voices that we've been able. Thank you.
Bravo! Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Bravo.
Fantastic.
Thanks
Well,
very much.
everyone, a reminder that links to the books will be on our Cultivating Voices live poetry page. If you're here in Zoom in the chat, you've got links to the books. I do hope you will pick up more than a few copies today to support the poets and their presses. And if you have upcoming events or things you'd like to share, now would be a great time to put things into the chat. And a reminder to join us next week for our 90-minute live wild card open mic. 15 poets will have 5 minutes each on the poetry of their choice. That's the wild card. Signups begin in the Zoom room 15 minutes before the hour until we fill. And we will have a wait list for poets to read one poem each, if we have time conserved from those 15 readers. We did pretty well last week. As always, again, my just immense gratitude to each of you for coming out live today to listen to the poetry of Emily Mohn-Slate, Teri Cross Davis, and Matt Mooney. And as I share with you each week, our humanity depends on our deepest of listening to one another. And there is nothing that provides us that opportunity, I think, more than the act of sharing and listening to poetry. Thank you so much for joining us here today to engage in this practice of poetry. I wish you all a very, very humble and peaceful week, and my best health to all of you. Thank you, and I hope we'll see you next week back here on Cultivating Voices live poetry. Sandy Yannone signing out for the afternoon and evening, and for some of us, McMesa morning.